In this video, we're going to take a look at the code that implements the pseudocode algorithm we finished looking at in the preceding video. Before I look at the code with you, I'm going to go ahead and execute the script that implements that pseudocode algorithm, and that way you can see it in action. So as you may recall, we're asking the user to enter the individual pass-fail results, and you can see I'm prompting the user with 1 for pass and 2 for fail, so they know what to input into the program. And remember that we want to be able to test whether more than 8 students pass the exam so that we can bonus the instructor. So I want to run this program twice, once in which we don't have enough students passing and once in which we do. So let's say every other grade in this case was just a 1 or a 2 to start out. So we have 10 total grades, 5 passed and 5 failed, and you don't see anything about a bonus to the instructor. And let me go ahead and rerun that same application, and this time let's enter 9 1s and a 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and a 2, and now we see that 9 people passed, 1 failed, and because enough people passed, we are going to bonus the instructor in this case. So that's the basic execution of the script that implements the pseudocode algorithm that we described in the preceding video. So with that said, let me switch over to a text editor here, and now we're looking at the source code that goes along with the pseudocode we just looked at. Now first of all, I want you to notice that we did in fact use comments that talk about the initialization, the processing, and the termination portions of our program. So for initialization of the variables, remember we had 2 pseudocode statements, one representing the fact that passes should be set to 0 and one that failures should be set to 0. So these 2 statements match up 1 for 1 with those pseudocode statements. And in fact, what a lot of people like to do is use their pseudocode statements as comments in the code. So you could actually start by taking your pseudocode, turning it into comments, and then interspersing that with the actual Python code. And that can be a real help to you as you begin to learn how to solve problems. So next up we have the processing phase, and remember we had 10 students to process, so we know with the for statement and the built-in range function that we can specify the precise number of iterations of the loop or repetitions of the loop. In this case, range will produce 0 through 9, which is a total of 10 integer values. So for every one of those 10 values, we are going to prompt the user to enter the result, the exam grade, and we're going to take that value, convert it to an integer, and store it. Then, using a nested control statement to figure out was this a pass or a fail, we are going to have this if-else determine that. So result equals 1. If that is true, then we'll add 1 to the passes variable. So remember, with an assignment, the right side evaluates first, so passes plus 1 takes the current value of passes, adds 1 to it, and then that new value that we just calculated gets assigned back to the variable passes. And in this implementation, we are assuming that if it was not a 1, it's a 2. Now, of course, the user could make a mistake and type the wrong value, in which case we're going to count it based on this as a failure by incrementing the failures counter. As an exercise at the end of the chapter, we ask you to think about that and rewrite this code to ensure that the user only ever enters precisely a 1 for a pass or a 2 for a fail. Now, this is a nested control statement because it's indented inside the suite of the for statement. So this code executes only while the for is executing, and then once the for loop terminates, we move on to the termination phase. And in that termination phase, you may recall we had basically 1 for 1, just like actually in the processing phase. This all matches up pretty much one for what we described in our pseudocode. Down here in the termination phase as well, we're going to summarize the results by displaying the number of passes and the number of failures. And if the number of students who passed is greater than 8, is more than 8, we will print out bonus to instructor. So that's the complete code implementation of that pseudocode. And again, I would encourage you to go back and look at the pseudocode and compare each of the code statements you see here in this script file with the corresponding pseudocode statements, and you'll see that they transitioned over basically as one-for-one pseudocode to Python code. Now, as you become a better Python programmer and programmer in general, you won't need to refine your pseudocode to that level. You'll simply be able to kind of sketch out your thoughts and know that a certain control statement or nested control statement is required to implement a given pseudocode statement.